Okay, I think even in this huge room, we can start the session, but before saying anything, I'm sorry, I'm talking in English and not in Portuguese. It would be much worse for you if I try in Portuguese. Before we start, Teresa and her team are going to tell us about some of their experiences in participating in an event which is called CANSAT, but I think you will tell us everything about it, right? Come here, come here. You can go there, and Mohamed will let the floor to these people before.
Thank you. Okay. Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Correia and this is my team, Magnosat. We are the winners of this year's CANSAT national competition, and therefore we are going to represent Portugal in the European CANSAT competition this June. So what is CANSAT? It's a Ciência Viva in Portugal space initiative that challenges students to simulate a real-life satellite launching mission, from the development of an idea to the embodiment of this idea into a physical module that you can see here, and then the data analysis from the data we recorded during the launch in the final. So our project is a can-sized satellite that measures temperature and atmospheric pressure along the fall and is equipped with the alternative landing system based on electromagnetic repulsion. This competition provided us a new way of learning, very important to us in order to develop our knowledge in many scientific areas, for example, electronics, programming, 3D modeling, and even electromagnetic fields. And as well as other soft skills that are very important in the working fields, such as public speaking, team working, and also time management skills, very important. Our experience at the final in Ponte Sor was also fascinating and unforgettable, since we were surrounded by huge names of the science Portuguese community, and also by the amazing Ciência Viva crew that helped us a lot. And for that, we would like to thank once again Ciência Viva and its partners for this initiative, because this experience definitely shaped our future careers in the space industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I had the wonderful pleasure of being there while you were testing your satellites and spending times making the last adjustment until 2 o'clock in the evening. But I think you also had fun, except a lot of hard work. So thank you again for your commitment and your project. And good luck for the final. Okay, welcome everyone. This session is devoted to science and society. The original convener should have been Rosalia Vargas. For those who know Rosalia, you can see that I'm not Rosalia Vargas. And the second convener should have been Pedro Russo from Ciência Viva too, who, for those who know Pedro Russo, you would see that I'm not Pedro Russo. They are both confined and they could not be here with us. And so I am Matteo Merzagora. My name is Matteo. I'm from Italy and France, professionally from France and by birth from Italy. I work in an association which is called TRAS, who does science and society type of activities. I will talk about that later. And I have the extreme great pleasure of having been invited by Ciência Viva to be a thinker in residence. I think it's one of the most beautiful things you can dream of, to be asked to think together with all the team that engage in science communication here. I will spend a month now, here in Portugal, trying to get a grasp of what happens in this country about science communication. I just knew already something because we had many collaborations before. The session has is left with 3 speakers now, which I will ask them to introduce themselves briefly in order that we get to know a bit each other, and then everyone would have about 10 minutes for developing his thinking, and we will have hopefully a little hour to discuss about what's up, what's at stake, what are the challenging issues in the relationship between science and society today. I would ask a very proactive attitude from the audience, meaning that if nobody asks questions, it means that we will stay seated for an hour without saying anything. It's really boring. So I propose that we adopt another type of posture, which is asking questions, even interrupting us if you wish. So Mohamed Daoud, you come from Egypt, invited country at Scientia 2022. What is your background and what is your interest in science communication?
So, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to represent my country in terms of science communication and public engagement. So, basically, I have 10 years of work in public engagement and science communication, and I'm considered as one of the pioneers in the field in Egypt. I was working at the American University in Cairo, where I'm working on managing community-led projects that are geared toward school students and refugees, indigenous people, underrepresented communities in Egypt. And I just moved recently to Europe. I just started working on another project that is funded by the European Commission. It's about sustainability. It's called Just Nature. And the premise of the project is to drive a just transition state based on nature-based solution towards low-carbon cities across different 6 cities in Europe for different 6 city learning labs. So I'm kind of like a mediator between the researchers and the public communities, including policymakers, decision makers, and so on.
Thank you. And if I had to ask you in one sentence, what is the key point of what you are going to tell us later?
So, because I think Egypt is the country guest of this conference, I think it does make sense to talk about the challenges and opportunities of science communication in Egypt.
Wonderful. And Anna Delicado? Same question. What is your job? What do you do at the University of Lisbon? And what is your interest in science communication?
Well, I'm a sociologist by training. I work at the Social Science Institute of the University of Lisbon for the past, 16 years? 15 years. And I can say that probably the thread that connects the different projects in which I've worked or even coordinated is science and society. I've worked on many different topics, from environmental risk to nuclear energy, from renewable energies now to carbon capture and storage, and recurrently I also do research about science communication and science engagement with the public. And I've worked on 2 European projects about that topic, and that's probably what's going to inspire my talk here today, but it wasn't prepared, so it's a surprise.
But I have another little question. What was the element that made you decide that as a sociologist you would try to understand and treat the way science is perceived in society? Was there something that you can identify that made you interested in that specific topic among the many interesting topics that sociology can tackle?
Well, I started my professional life working in a government agency that was called the Observatory of Sciences and Technologies. And so that sparked my interest on the field of science, in particular in Portugal. But I started to become involved in science communication with my PhD thesis, which was about science museums or science in museums, and it was inspired by a visit to a scientific museum in Coimbra during a conference, and it created a lifelong interest and passion for how to show science to the public in a way that interests the public, because the museum was absolutely empty. And so have been most of the science museums I've visited in Portugal. So I want to crack the mystery of why it doesn't work like that. Why is it so difficult to get people engaged with science? But I always blame science, not the public.
I think this is going to be a clear topic of discussion. Mohammed, you're going to start. The rules are 10 minutes, and then I will follow, and then you will comment on what we say, and then just start preparing all your reactions.
Great.
You have this magic tool in order to advance.
So I have this tendency to overdo the time I have. So if you like, just come and grab me from my tie here. So no worries about that. So hello everyone. So basically, as I said, I'm going to talk about the science communication in Egypt. Like I'm going to do a comparative study between the history of science communication. Like all over the world, especially in the UK and Europe, and I'm going to compare it to what happened in Egypt as well. So to kickstart, so you might ask, what is science communication? I think this is a tricky question because we're still actually struggling with the definition of science communication. We have lots of perspectives in terms of that. But science communication, basically, if we break down this world, so what we call it public understanding of science. So what I mean by science? Science is, I think, from my point of view, I think it is the best thing that we have right now to describe the world around us. Science means knowledge, obviously, and we understand the world through experimentation. So we do it through experiments, empirical evidences. So this is science. So what is communication? Basically, if I hold a mobile phone, basically you have to have a sender, you have to have a transmitter, and you have to have a receiver. So for science communication, scientists or the scientific community are the senders, and the media with different kind of media, we're going to talk about that later, are the transmitters, and the public are the receivers. So what I mean by the word public? So public can include scientific community, can include mediators, can include decision makers, lay public. I don't like this term, but it's what we say, like people who has no experience in terms of science, and like stakeholders, attentive public or unattentive public. So this is like, in a simple way, how to describe the word public and understanding of science. So it has too many definitions. It, like some people call it like science in society, science and society, informal science education, science popularization, science simplification, and recently science engagement or public engagement. So obviously there is a big difference between science education, formal and informal. So science communication is in a way like informal science education. This is like one of the basic definitions that we had before. And, but the whole premise of science and communication is to break the gap, to bridge the gap between science and society. And this is the title of our session today. So I talked about the media through you can communicate science to the public, that I already mentioned area. So you can do it like through different ways, and one of them in museums. My colleague here just mentioned museums, and museums is one of the best ways to actually talk about science. And so science centers, citizen science projects, social media, like especially with the younger generation right now is TikTok videos and stuff like that. So I think social media is really crucial in terms of like communicating science to the public. Printed media as well, public lectures, policy making, and et cetera, et cetera. So the list goes on and on and on. It depends on your creativity now. So let's talk about the history of science communication. So it's like, I'm going to try to make it like more fun. So if we track down the history of science communication, I cannot label a start to it, to be honest. But a lot of people consider like the 19th century with the old industrial revolution is really a crucial point for science communication. And because like it's brought this idea of applied science, and people started to look at science that it's something that touched their daily life in somehow. And there was like big exhibitions going on back then in that era, and people got interested in like learning and to be taught about science. So I'm gonna like move forward a little bit to after the World War II. And this is a lot of people like, they say like this is the start of modern science communication. I totally disagree, but I'm gonna like propose here what happened after the World War II. So if I have the tools to define like 3 main aspects that happened during this era, it's like about 3 ways of communication models. And the first one, as you can see, we depicted the public as empty vessels. They know nothing. And we used the media to like mediate like between scientists and the public. There was no direct interaction between scientists and the public. It's only through media. And this is what we call deficit model. And from its name, it's deficit, which means it didn't work, obviously. Because like this hierarchy structure of when you deal with people, like you feel like you are in the top of the pyramid and people are at the bottom and they do not have the knowledge or the capacity to actually participate in the scientific process. So, and this is like, I love this picture because it shows how everything worked back then, because you have the political policymakers on the top of the pyramid, and we have the general public at the bottom there, and the media in the middle. So we do that through PR, we do it through like all the media, things that we do with the public just to address what the policymakers believe, not the scientists, what the scientists wants to say. And that was like, this is why we call it the deficit model. So what happened to change this view? What happened to tell us about this is actually a deficit model? So if we go, like, I'm going to give a case here. So again, as I said, like throwing facts at people to change their minds, this is what we call deficit model. So what happened? I need first to talk about what risk is. So risk is a perceived probability and magnitude of an adverse effect that can harm people, like even like people might die out of it. And this is what happened back in the 90s with the BSE crisis in the UK. I don't know if you've heard it or not, but one of the recent this is like a list of recent risks that we have, like obviously coronavirus is one of them on top of the list, and we have plenty of them, as you can see. And but what happened for the PST crisis in the UK, that the government said, like, this is the agriculture minister, John Gummer, he said, like, he went for an ad on TV eating burger from the cows that got the disease, the mad cow disease, and he said, like, you can eat burger safely from the cow that got infected by the cow mad disease. And that was really wrong on so many levels, because people died eating this burger. And this is what started all the whole thing about, like, this is the deficit model. We need to talk to people, we need to reach them out, and we need to get the scientists to be in direct contact with the public. And so this is a lot of, like, the media didn't tackle this problem correctly, and this is, again, what's like, there was no trust in science, and you cannot blame the public. But was not just the reason for the public mistrust, as you can see. This is like the lack of transparency, the ethics, and the community participation in scientific decision-making as well, because they weren't part of it back then. So what we have learned from that, before the BSE crisis, 2 minutes. Okay, cool, I have to run now. Oh, yes. So, again, what we got, the lesson that we got from this is to go a dialogue model. So if I move, sorry, I'm going to skip all of that. If I'm going from the deficit model to the dialogue model, the dialogue model means that we need people to talk to people and to get them, reach them on the ground through, like, science communicators, mediators, or through conversation between the scientific community and the public. But that wasn't good, as well, as we figured out later. That's why we have this model that we call conversation model or contextual model, like the community, the public community, can contribute in actually the scientific process itself. And this is bringing me to talk about Egypt. What happened in Egypt? So I'm going to skip that. So what happened in Egypt? So there is a few literature that actually can tackle down the history of science communication in Egypt. But I found there are 3 points in the history of Egypt that can give us, like, it contribute massively in this history of science communication in Egypt. The first one, and all of them, you're going to see that they're related to the economical and political upheaval that happened in Egypt. The first one was during the French colonization, where they started the first magazines called Egyptien, Decade d'Egyptien. And there was like a dedicated column in the magazine talking about science and society that is going on back then. And that was the first point. The second point was during the regime of Muhammad Ali Pasha, and this is what we call modern Egypt. What happened, he sent like scientists all the way to Europe, and that triggered the translation of manuscripts and all of these movements, and it brought like a lot of interest in science to the public in Egypt. And especially with the establishment of new organizations like universities in Egypt, University of Ahliya, which is currently called Cairo University, and other institutions like ASRT, the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology, and so on. And then the third point was during the January Revolution back in 2011. And to witness a true boom on science communication that happened in Egypt, you have to move forward all the way to what happened after the revolution. But before that, we actually started in science communication, but why it didn't boom like what happened in Europe or other areas all over the world? That's because like we lost like, that was like censorship issues. There was like funding issues as well. And one of these, I can give you this picture that I might end with. If you can see this is a National Geographic magazine. The English edition is then on the left, and the Arabic edition is on the right. And if you look at the second title in the English edition, you can see evolution never happened. And it's got removed completely from the Arabic edition. Why? Because it's a taboo topic, because it's a taboo topic in the Middle East area. Because like people, this is contradicted like religious beliefs. So there was like a lot of censorship that happened back then. But luckily, after the revolution, after the movement of people like freedom and stuff, we started to get to know that science is really beneficial if we want to go if we want to excel in our economics and everything. So a lot of opportunities happened. So one of the challenges that we faced is funding, and another thing is misinformation as well. So a lot of the misinformation going on through the media. But luckily, we have a lot of opportunities that are going on right now. So one of them is just like the Academy of Scientific Technology and Research. They have funds to start this project that I worked on with American University in Cairo to go and reach out to the underserved communities to change the perception that we have in Egypt. Because in Egypt, people tend to believe that science is only for wealthy people, because they are more concerned about other things like provision of food and health. So, and that actually give me the idea to go and tackle down this kind of issue, because 70% of high school students, they prefer to choose social science tracks rather than science track, humanitarian and social science track rather than science track. And the majority of this 7% are just women. So there was like in gender inequality, and there was you need to reach out to these underrepresented communities all over the country. And this is what we managed. We started the project back in 2014 with the collaboration with the Ministry of Education and ASRT and the American University in Cairo. And we successfully reached out millions of students across the country. We even, so the ASRT has 7 different regional centers across, 10 actually now, regional centers across the country. And we turned these centers into science centers. And we feed them up with all the equipment, or all the information needed. And we have a network for science communication right now. We have a lot of science festivals going on, science museums, science weeks as well. And recently, we just started a forum online. It's an online forum for science and media. We have a science hub for scientists to bring them together to the public. We hosted a lot of citizen science projects in Egypt as well. And all of that happened in the last 7 or 8 years. And I can tell I'm going to end with this, because I know I'm overrun my time now. So I'm going to end with this. So I can fairly say that people started to trust in science in Egypt, especially after the pandemic. And they already know how crucial scientists played in this pandemic. And this is actually good because we started to see scientists go into the media, they've been interviewed, they're talking about science in the media, and this is something that we haven't seen before. Obviously, we're not yet there at the same level that science communication happening in Europe. For instance, we still need more focus on research for science communication public engagement because we barely see any research publications in terms of science communication in Egypt. But we're moving there, we're moving toward the right direction right now. And all thanks to all the people from SRT, from the American University in Cairo, and other entities that are doing great job in terms of science communication. And I want to end up with this words, with a quote, "Science is not finished until it is communicated." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mohamed. We will have maybe time to go deeper into the Egyptian situation. So maybe I will stay here. Do you see the screen well enough, or the chairs prevent from seeing them? Is it okay? Okay. Perfect. So next one is myself, that I play this double role. If you can put on my slides. What I would like to do is try to, you say that there are things moving, things that are being reinvented in Egypt. It's not that in other places in the world things now needs to be stable. We need to renew science communication because the world is evolving, and the Red Queen theory. If you stay where you are, the only way to stay where you are is to run as fast as you can in an evolutionary context. And so science communication should obey also that rule. And so I'm going to try to spot a few points that I personally believe are interesting, and I like to share them with you. And start from observation, because you always should observe the world. You see here a picture of a restaurant. There is one clue that can tell us that this picture was taken quite recently. And the reason why is that you can see the cooks. If you go to a restaurant that was established 50 years ago, you probably would have old systems that are preventing you from see, smell, observe what's happening in the kitchen, while today we try to make everything which is behind the scene as visible as possible. I think it's something that belongs to a way of interpreting our social life. And today, contemporary world values windows, open windows, more than it values walls. And this, you can also see it. This was from last night in Lisbon, and you can see the same type of situation. And this was from another very interesting night in Lisbon. So all type of restaurants that have this element. Second observation. If I ask you a definition of a stair, it's something that allows you to climb higher and to allow to access buildings and etc. But if you observe what's around you, you will see that the stairs, public stairs like this one, are mainly places in which to sit and spend time and meet friends. And so this is Mark Regelman, a very genial designer, who decided, well, let's not try to convince people that stairs are made to go to a building. Let's accept that that's what people do on stairs. And so let's design something that will allow them to facilitate the use of stairs as a place where to sit. The contemporary world tends to value user-driven innovations. We listen to what users do rather than imposing. With the stairs, we could have asked the people to just go away. This is not a place to sit. No, we try to make so that they will feel comfortable because that's the way they decided that the stairs should be used, and that's the way it should be done. And here again, a picture taken in Lisbon a while ago to show that what we are talking about is quite everywhere. Third examples that I like to make, and the last one, how would you interpret this picture? This is a guy making ropes in Guatemala. One way of interpreting it would be, well, this is an artisan that has not enough money to buy proper equipment. Of course, there is a second way of describing this picture. This is a genial innovator that have a great idea to solve problems the way it has them. The truth is in between the two, of course. This is somebody who has valuable knowledge adapted to the system in which he lives. Of course, he would like to have better equipment. He has not, and so he tries to find the best solution that works in this environment. This guy was participating in a beautiful research project made by French NGOs, ATD Carmonde, an NGOs whose objective is to eradicate poverty in the world. As simple as that. They say, well, it would take time, but let's start. That's their point. And the Oxford University getting together and trying to do something which appears so obvious that is amazing to think that has not ever been done before. That is, if you do research on poverty, you include poor people as experts. That has never been done before. Poor people were object of study, subject, if you want, be less nasty. But as expert, sitting on a table, spending 2 years of time in 6 different countries, working with researchers to try to define what are the different dimensions of poverty, this inclusion is something quite new and quite radical, actually, even if it is absolutely trivial and obvious. So, why am I telling these 3 examples? Let's go back to science and society, which is the topic. And I think the metaphor were quite clear, and the reasons why I put them are the scientific community at first, and the science communication community also, capable of valuing windows rather than valuing walls, capable of really opening up, really going into this open science that we talk a lot about, capable of valuing autonomously defined uses of knowledge. If people do with the knowledge we produce things that are not the one that we were supposed, that we, for which we worked, are we able to accept it or not? Capable of valuing non-academic source of knowledge, all the very precious knowledge which is around and that science should be capable to harness and to transform in what we know has a different status, which is scientific knowledge. But can we harness that? Of course, the answer is very often no. Our communities are not ready to do that. And there are good examples that says yes. So let's keep an optimistic view. And my point is, can we ensure that the public engagement activities become learning opportunities for all the actors involved, including scientists? So can we think of science engagement activities that are beneficial for research, that help scientists do better their work? Can we move from public communication of science to public communication also for science? And I will tell that this is not that easy. Think of most of the majority, of course not all, of science communication situations that we stage. I say we because that's my job and that's what I do. It's not a criticism. I try to observe what happens. When we do a science communication activities, mainly we invite scientists only for what they know. And why are we inviting public? We are inviting the public because they don't know. So the only thing that interests us about the public is their ignorance. Isn't that a bad situation? Because scientists mainly are interested in what they don't know. That's our job. I mean, I was a scientist a long time ago, but that's your job, is what you don't know. So why? All your life you are interested in what you don't know, except when you meet the public, that you are there only for what you know. And of course, why can't you be interested also in what the public has to offer? Is this a condition for dialogue? Probably not. So there's something to reflect and change there. Another absurd yet common situation. I heard very often scientists and science communicators saying, the public is ignorant. The public believe in whatever stupid things they are told. The public has irrational, inconsistent behavior. And then, the next sentence, the public should trust us more. Come on, how can you establish a situation of trust when you start by saying that your interlocutor is ignorant, stupid, and inconsistent? Then you ask to trust and dialogue? Come on, no, we never work that way. Trust in science and technology cannot be built unless science and technology is willing to listen and is willing to change, accept the fact that the first work of all science communication and science in society is help science change. Because when we say that, oh no, all women can access to science, no, it's not true. If there are 30%, if they are because they are invisible walls, and you don't change by making an image of science that accepts women, that you make a change. Is by making so that an equal number of women access to a higher level of career in science. And trust in science and technology cannot be built unless we stop considering the public as the problem and ourselves as the solution. How many times I've participated in debates in which, the public is really a problem. What do you mean the public is a problem? It's meaningless. And I think you all recognize if you have been in this type of situation. So, a little model. We have tendency of seeing a clear-cut line between the knowledge production system and the knowledge sharing system. Knowledge production is science, is research centers, and is communicated through scientific journals. The system of sharing is public as an interlocutor, the media and science centers, festival, and all the enormous variety of beautiful activities that we do. We had a model, thank Mohamed for introducing this very clearly, in which the main channel of communication was on this direction. Then we said, well, okay, come on, let's start to try to dialogue a bit, and we invented this. But this is not enough, because what I think is really interesting is that there is a zone, in this gray zone, between knowledge production and knowledge sharing, which is an enormous field to harness the future of science communication. Is the most interest area for scientific culture. Places an initiative in which the interest of science, of producing new knowledge, and the interest of science communication, of sharing this knowledge, converge. They are the same. So when we do science communication, we do it also to make better science, not just to let it know to other people. In some papers that I wrote recently, this is my work for the last years, I call this the fact that Science Center and Science in Society initiatives should become research facilities, research infrastructure. When you have something too small to be observed, you build a microscope. When something is too far, you build a telescope. What about if something is socially relevant or wicked problem, as we heard it this morning? What do you have? What do you have at hand in order to grasp the elements that your eyes is not able to grasp alone? You build a culture center, a science communication initiative, one of these type of activities that becomes research facility, research infrastructure, which are knowledge production device as well as knowledge sharing device. And I think every university or science center should either be equipped with one or link with one of the existings. Some examples. There is a beautiful new project that I just discovered, I didn't know, in Scienza Viva, Rede de Quintas, the network of science farms. What is innovative about that is that it doesn't take science and put it somewhere and leave it as it is, but try to harness what is the contextual situation of the place. For example, production of cherries or production of olives, or a place which is by the sea, so he has a specific, and try to work on all what is locally important for economy, for knowledge, and etc., and make a center that at the same time will help scientists make better work on this area, and the citizen to better know through science what they have under their feet from always. Very interesting project that I'm very willing to discover more in the future. Another beautiful project, Segundo Torrao. A group of, it's a French-Portuguese collaboration, a group of people living in this very underserved community in Portugal, in Lisbon, started asking themselves what happened with climate change, because we live by the sea, we know about tides, we know about waves. Is our neighbor changing? And thanks to a project which is called Nouvelle Commanditaire Science, I don't try the translation, a group, Les Ateliers des Jours à Venir, started to work and bring together and find internationally a group of scientists that would like to answer to this question, and that were helped by local fishermen, for example, to gather data that for the scientific system of placing captors and etc. would have taken years to know what are the behaviors in the different situations, climatic situation, etc. And then they had all the knowledge which was there. Just it was not expressed in a way that was usable for science. Their job was make it usable for science and recognize and valuing this knowledge. I think it's a beautiful project, and I hope it will be spread around. And also, project of social inclusion. Here again, don't take science as something that comes, science is universal, but the way you communicate to people is local, always. And so a partnership with the local association that work in underserved place and value science in this context is a very interesting one. I'm almost finished. I wanted to give a couple examples from ourselves. Just these are the two last slides. I also took a bit of delay. Sorry. That's the problem of not having a moderator external. One thing that we try to do, is always design exhibition as exploration. So exhibition should be interesting questions for the public and for scientists. Example, Science Frugal, how do you make transform used technology in well-performing scientific instruments? Together with Association for Development, makers, engineers, we used the exhibition to gather the knowledge about how you can transform a CD-ROM reader in a very performing microscope. The science of choice, or science and diversity. I skip because I took delay. Another element that maybe we can talk about is about training in science communication. One of the things we started to doing in TRAS, thanks to a partnership with the Université de Paris and the Learning Planet Institute, we had done 10 years of teaching to scientists how to be convincing, how to be good communicators. I mean, it's important to do it, but it's not enough. And so we decided to stop, and now we do courses. I personally teach a course which is how equip scientists to listen properly to the public. And the assignment that I give students is identify learning opportunity in the world out there that are meaningful to you and useful for your research. At first, they are shocked. It's very hard. Wait, what? And then they found beautiful things that comes from Van Gogh, that come from Frankenstein stories, from an analogy between pasta type and biodiversity, and of course from the most interesting TV series that talk about science, such as Black Mirror, and first and foremost, The Simpsons, probably the most intelligent reflection on science that has been produced in the last 20 years, and I'm serious. So, thank you very much. Now I change hat. It's kind of, I'm sorry about that. In the grammar of presenting, this should never happen, but COVID should never happen, actually. So that. So Anna, is your turn. I think we'll let you react, or based on what we have said, bring us your point of view.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I don't really have a prepared presentation, but I'm going to try to explain some of the ideas that came to me during this presentation, but also on the 20-something years I've been studying this connection between science and society. First of all, I have to say that I don't like these big labels, and I think they are not very useful. Science, society, public. I know it's a shorthand, it's a crutch, it's a way of defining something that is extremely big and diverse. But in practical terms, when we discuss how to increase trust in science, how to better communicate or engage the public, I think it's useful to take a step backwards and try to understand what we mean by science. Science is a really large endeavor. It has lots of different activities inside it, and lots of different disciplines. And so I think it's a bit unrealistic to think that we connect to science as an entity in itself. Especially when we go down to our daily lives, to the way in which science can eventually be useful for us. We don't connect with science, we connect with particular aspects of science. I don't think a lot of people take a long time to reflect on the science that is done on laboratories, about the scientific method. I don't think that the majority of the people even are interested in that, or even it's necessary to be interested in that. I know, it's a bit controversial. But take also the audience, the public. It's also extremely diverse. We have people in the audience that love insects, others that love planets and astronomy. There are true amateurs of science. Those are really interested in science communication. And of course, there should be avenues, there should be venues, there should be events that cater to that need of knowing more about the fields that interest people. Most people in their daily lives are worried about their health, the environment in which they live, how technology impacts their daily lives, and not necessarily what is a black hole or how many legs a spider has. But when I talk to scientists and we discuss science communication, that's usually what they tell me. They want to communicate. They want everyone to know how many legs has a spider. They are usually not really interested, as my esteemed colleagues also said before me, in trying to understand what people want to know about science. They are really interested in selling their science, showing their science, but often not interested in, not even have questions. Of course, they welcome questions, they love replying to questions, but they are not really interested in listening to the people, to their concerns, to their needs, to their doubts. And this is something of a mismatch about what people want to hear and what people want to tell them, what scientists want to tell them. And this generates also a problem. That is why, even though we have a wide array of science communication activities, particularly in Portugal, which is the country I know best, we still don't have a population that is particularly interested in science, that is particularly keen on going to science centers, visiting exhibitions, except a few years ago, the Darwin exhibition in Gulbenkian, which was a real success. But most people don't have the time nor the inclination to go and consume science communication. But that does not mean that these publics should not be catered for by science communication, and particularly by science engagement. And this is also something interesting that came up from both the talk of my two esteemed colleagues, is this difference between science communication and science engagement. And it's a question of the deficit model, of course. It's a long history that I think most of you are well aware, and Mohammed did give a very good presentation about it. But we have to be aware that science communication and science engagement have to work on different levels. Science communication can be to the masses, can cater to large audiences in media, in television, in social media, in exhibitions even. Science engagement does not work at that big of a scale. And that is why someone I really like in the field of science communication in Portugal used to call this gourmet science communication, because it requires individualized attention to the audience. It requires a face-to-face interaction, or at best an online interaction. The opportunity for citizens to meet directly with scientists and ask them questions and share with them their concerns. So the two things are not really the same, and they are not, one is not the evolution of the other. They are two different activities that serve different purposes. I would say that science communication is great for non-formal education of science for children and young people. It's great for amateurs who are really interested in that sort of information and knowledge and area. Science engagement, I think it works best when it deals with actual concerns of the people, be it technological applications, which I think is probably the major source of concern, not science itself, but the technologies that derive from it. And science engagement all has to work on a smaller scale, at a scale where there is time for reflection, time for dialogue, time for going back and forth on the issues, not to persuade people that the scientists know what is best for them, but to reach a point of engagement where the public does have an impact on scientists, like our moderator and speaker just said. But actually, I have to contradict you. That project about poverty, it can be really interesting, but innovative it is not. In the social sciences, we have something called participatory action research since the 60s and the 70s, which involves people participating in research projects that directly benefit them as sort of researchers. So actually, it was the social sciences that invented citizen science. And now I see with great pleasure that this is a field that is developing so much, citizen science, because I think that is really an opportunity for direct engagement between scientists and the public. But once again, most of these activities are geared towards what interests the scientists. They want to use citizens as labor and in a way to promote their discipline and their topic of research. Much more, but there are a few cases, and Segundo Torrão is an example of that. It's a bottom-up citizen science project where the scientists took the care to listen to the residents of the neighborhood and ask them first. Climate change was not proposed by the researchers. It came up in a dialogue between the researchers and the population. And so they are investigating a topic that is of a scientific nature, of course, but that impacts them directly. And that's what I think is the best way of doing citizen science in its true form. And finally, I understand and I agree entirely with the need to teach scientists on how to listen to the public. Because these days, most of us work on European projects, we know that whatever the project, there's always a requirement to do public engagement. And that's a wonderful thing for me, because I'm a social scientist, so I'm often hired to do that part in research projects. But this represents a change more in the philosophy of the funders of science than of the practitioners of science. But I can guarantee you that, from my experience with working with engineers, with geologists, and working together in public engagement has shown them the value of public engagement and how much they can learn with people and how surprised they sometimes are with the contributions of the people. And this is something that I don't see being taught in science schools, in universities. It's still the notion that scientists need to learn to be communicators still hasn't penetrated the academia. I struggle to find any training for young scientists in universities. There's barely of that, let alone training in public engagement with science. And I think that is a real problem, because if the scientists can't recognize the value of engaging with the public, and they are not taught of how to do that and how to listen, then it's difficult that change can come from within, and the issue of trust also comes from that. And just as a side note, trust and knowledge are not connected, as we were discussing just before this. We have really low levels of knowledge of science in Portugal, but we have huge amounts of trust. So the two things are not directly connected. What we do know is that when people have a little knowledge, they feel emboldened to question science, to, as a colleague of mine is now trying to do research on, do their own research about the topics. And this is not an anti-science perspective. It's an alternative vision of science. Probably not the one the mainstream would welcome, but this has to be understood not a reaction against science, but as in parallel to science. Much like in the 60s, the astrology movements and the New Age movements also had a lot of alternative science in them. And I think that these are fascinating topics, and we can stay here the whole afternoon.
Thank you very much. So now our schedule says that we have half an hour of discussion. The room is quite spread, so it's not easy for me to see if there are hands raising, but I'm sure there are many hands raising. And I'm not sure if I will be helped by somebody in order to bring a microphone all the way up there where somebody wants to speak. Well, I'll do it.
So you are a speaker, moderator, and facilitator as well.
Yeah, once you have two hats, you can have as many as you want.
A man of talents.
Vanessa, my name is Vanessa. I'm going to be probably a bit controversial as well. I'm always a bit saddened to see that in science communication, there's little emphasis on the fact that communication is a research field in itself and a professional field in itself. And it doesn't seem to be quite valued. We talk about science communication, but we don't talk about strategic communication coming to science. I don't quite agree that science communication is different than science engagement. And as I see communication being a way to bring change both at information, attitudes, and behaviors. So I think it all encompasses, it's encompassed in communication. So I would like to see your perspective on the roles of science communicators in science communication.
Thank you. Maybe Anna, you want to start with that from the academic community that studies science communication. So,
Well, I wouldn't say a word against my friends in the science communicators community. And so I believe that their role is very important because, as you said, it's a profession. It is a specific skill that can be taught and can be learned and can be applied. And so I think it's crucial because the fact is that scientists are, one of their roles should be do science communication, but they are not supposed to be experts in doing science communication. So they need, just as they need lab technicians to prepare their experiments, to calibrate their machines, they also need science communicators to help them translate their research to the public. Actually, it's an interesting issue because we did a public consultation for a European project a few years ago, and we realized that the public in all countries, but in Portugal I'm more familiar with the material, the public did not know that science communication was a profession, an occupation, that people did that for a living, but they thought it would be a really relevant role to be played. That scientists are too important and their time is too valuable to lose over science communication, so there should be mediators, there should be translators that help bring science to the public. And I think that shows the relevance of that occupation, and but also the fragility of this occupation currently, because it's not recognized in any sort of professional capacity, in a career, in anything. And so we have a problem because we demand more and more that the research centers are able to communicate their research and to disseminate it and make it available for potential users. But there is little investment on the people who can actually do that. And I think that is a problem that has to be solved, because I think in Portugal, the community of science communicators already has, 400, 500 people? And these are invisible people and people that are barely recognized in their profession. And it's something that really has to be improved.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I have a funny story about this. So I have a friend who got married, and when he tried to explain, he's a science communicator, and he was trying to explain his profession to his father-in-law. He's just like, keep talking about how science communication, what is science communication, what he's doing exactly, and after 5 minutes, so his father-in-law just looked at him and he said like, okay, so what are you doing? So are you a teacher or what? So yes, I can understand that it's really hard that people can digest that there is a profession called science communication. I even stopped a couple of times at the airport because my passport has the science communication specialist as a profession, and he says, just like, keep asking, like, what is science communication? What are you exactly doing? Most of people like misrecognize it as a communication engineer, like dealing with satellites, with like, can you solve my router? My router is not working. Can you do it? I'm not like an an engineer. I'm a science communicator. So yeah, I understand the point of view here.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, the fact that the organizers has invited 3 persons that are studying, well, I'm a bit more of a practitioner, but you are 2 persons that study science communication and science in society as their field is already a good sign. But to answer the question, I would make just would like to be a whistleblower in this sense. That is, attention not to see defending the field of science communication as an objective in itself. Because all academic system has a big issue in all academic fields, that at a certain moment they start spending most of their time designing the area of belonging of their community. So, in the metaphors that I used before, building walls that define this is science communication studies, this should be done by sociologists, this should be done by philosophers, this should be done. Careful. This is a big danger that the STS community, the Science and Technology Studies, which is the more general word that defines the field of research that deals with all these issues, they have this risk to become like a protected field in which all people that recognize themselves, that speak the same language, and make favors to each other, and all these things that happens in all academic field, and we know that is very, very negative for the progress of science.
I might add that I've read a recent, I don't know if you've read it, both of you, but it was about systematic analytical review about the huge gap between practitioners and researchers who do like science communication research, and how practitioners do not listen to what the research is there, and they do not even read what is going on in terms of research of science communication, and how researchers are distant from practitioners as well. They don't actually have access to data. They cannot collect more. If they collaborate together, that would be a better situation for sure.
Thank you for the question. There are 3 questions there. So, yeah. What I propose is that we take a few questions, or even if there are comments, please go on and comment. So there is no such a thing as, please, where is the question? If you have comments, you are free to.
Okay, hello, my name is Sarah. Thank you so much for your presentations. And I would just like to make you a question. It's that we now, if we look to our days right now, we have a problem of mistrust in science, and at the same time we have a problem of mistrust in communication, because the media, the press, is facing the same problem. And now we are talking about science communication. At some point, science communication is also engaged with the media and the press. And I think one of the greatest challenge that we have when we communicate science, and we have some sort of difficulty, is that it's not that people don't trust the science, it's because they rely very strongly on their convictions and beliefs. And this is a very personal thing, and it's difficult to go to someone with facts or with a beautiful story and say this is against all your convictions and beliefs. It's an emotional thing, so we also have to communicate our work with some sort of emotion. So my worry here is, in this context of mistrust in science, we have all the conspiracy theories and the negativity and all these things. How should we behave? How should we? Are we thinking in a different approach as science communicators when facing this rising problem at least in the West. I think it's all over the world. It's not only in the Western world. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know if, Anna, you want to discuss briefly this idea of is there a problem of mistrust in science and etc. I think I tried to make it clear in my presentation. My point of view is that the real problem is not that people don't trust science, it's that scientists don't trust people. That's the real issues, because if you look at all data that are around, and I ask my colleagues, which are more from the academic world, to maybe be more specific, but basically all surveys, all analyses, all studies say that there is a very, very high trust in science by the general public, with some local, because I think, Anna, you made it very clear, there is not such thing as trust in science. In some aspect of it, for example, it is very clear that people trust more science which is done by public bodies than science when it's done by private bodies. When science is made for the benefits of health, the level of trust increase. When it's done for other benefits, like you know, many people that study this knows the story of nanotechnology, convincing people that nanotechnology is good because it takes out the smell of the socks. And this was a complete boomerang going on, because you know, you have maybe a not very proved risk, but a suspicion of risk of silver nanoparticles. And what you want to do you want to take out bad smells from the socks, and you put in danger health in order to take out, come on. And then people mistrusted, and I think they were perfectly right to mistrust an enterprise, because did we ask if smell of the socks was a major problem in contemporary world? Maybe not. And so there are other reasons why probably nanotechnology is a very interesting topic, but please forget about I keep my smell, and I'm very happy with it. I don't put and this was a real campaign. Huh? It's not something that I'm making up. It was a campaign to promote nanotechnology, putting several examples, and people make the difference. Say this yes, this no, this yes, this no. There is no such thing as mistrust in science. If you can quote me a paper that says that mistrust in science is rising, I will be very happy, but you will not find one.
I totally agree. I don't think that we have evidence that mistrust in science is a ranging problem, especially in Europe. I can speak about the US, but I don't want to speak about the US. It has nothing to do with me, with my life. And we tend to look outwards and be too much inspired, perhaps, by the dilemmas and the controversies that happen elsewhere. It's not that we live in isolated systems, but we have to understand that Europe is different, and Portugal is very different. We have a vaccination rate of 90-something%. How can we talk about mistrust in science? And this is a new vaccine. The other day I was writing a chapter for a book, and I came across a really interesting citation, because I did another public consultation about a completely different topic, but the issue of vaccines came up, and it was done in October 2020, where vaccines haven't been invented yet, but were in the process of development. And there was this guy who was a reader of science and all these dissemination magazines, and he told us that he was very afraid of these vaccines that would mess up with DNA, because the governments are in such a rush to have a solution for the pandemic that they're speeding up science, so I'm concerned, I'm afraid. Is that an irrational feeling? I don't think so. Like nanotechnology is also a good example, because there was a rush to develop nanotechnologies and and applications of that technology in consumer products, and now we're discussing whether microplastics is a problem, but nanoparticles can be an even greater problem. So there was this rush to develop a technology without considering the impacts that it might have. And so I don't think that blind trust in science is a good thing. Far from it. I think reflexive trust and people getting information, and there's a lot of ways of getting information these days. When people are concerned, there's a lot of sources. We just have to make sure that the sources that these people access are based on solid evidence. So there's a work to be done by the scientific community and by governments and by institutions to provide, to make available trustworthy information to the public so that they can find that information and not be channeled to these misinformation channels. And regulating digital technologies should be a way. It's amazing because every time I open YouTube, the first video suggestions that come up are about climate denial or conspiracy theories. So the algorithm that we don't control, and presumably nobody does, he's pushing people into these sources of false information, of misleading information. And that's what concerns me, not the lack of trust in science.
Brilliant.
I think there were always on that side at least two questions.
Me. Hello, I'm Guilherme. First of all, thank you very much for your talks and for your comments. So I'd like to also start maybe by what was last said now. Like I think we have established that there is a problem with misinformation, especially misinformation in science. And so I think my question, without trying to be polemic, would be, do you think that from your perspective, these people who are spreading misinformation should be able to have access to these types of platforms where they can spread it? I understand that there's the issue of free speech and everything, but for example, maybe in some matters, like global warming, for example, maybe we don't have the time to have that debate. And because we have to fight ourselves and try to be better communicators, and we have to fight lobbying, and we have to fight a lot of other external factors. So yeah, I guess this is my question about the platforms for misinformation. Thank you.
I propose that we take a few questions so that we ensure that everybody that has something to share has the time to do it. So I think there is the woman there and the man at the right, my right.
Thank you. I actually had two questions, but I'll turn my first one to a comment and the second one to a question. So first, I would like to thank you for your work. As I'm a high school student and I've never heard about science communication, at least in this way, I've been told in our projects we should disseminate our work, but in a way like we do our work independent of the public, and then we transmit exactly what we did just to share. So this concept of having in mind what actually having in mind the public and the communication before starting the work, and do our project a bit with that in consideration, is new, and I think is very interesting, and I would like to see something like this incorporated in our education system, in our classes or projects. So if you know about some measures we could take in this area, and also a bit controversial, but I would like to ask, since we all know people are more keen in believing what they already think it's real, like their previous beliefs, and there's a bigger resistance in believing in something, even if it's factual, that it's opposite to what they think. So I'm asking if this thought of doing or publishing things according to what the public wants to hear isn't going to become a problem. Like, for example, the climate situation took a big while to start spreading, and people start worrying about it because of this resistance that everything's okay, that these products are okay to use. So even though there were being published things about that, so I'm asking, what is the midterm in here?
Thank you. Excellent question. I think we take also the next one. Then you get the chance to choose which one you want.
Thank you. I'll try not to change too much the subject, but I will do another challenge for you, because I'm a science manager. I work for a funding agency, FCT, and my work is sometimes to worry about how to communicate science in a way that people understands, the society understands, where is the money we are getting from people to give to science, where the money is, and if it is useful to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Are there other observation, comments? Yeah, one last one for the moment.
Hello, I work in the same institution as my colleague Danielle there. I'm coordinating a project in the Atlantic level in research and innovation. And one thing that we are learning, and also together with a report on the mission Starfish, the mission for healthy oceans and waters, it's that there is really an emotional gap between what we want to communicate as a scientist and what the community wants to hear. And this is, I think it's really because we are not listening the people. So maybe, Danielle, what is missing there, in my view, is that we are not making the right questions and we are not understanding the whys behind the others are making those questions. So really the issue of listening the other, understanding what is this lack of what is this gap, emotional gap that exists. It will make us more closer to the public, and they will be engaged, because one thing is to communicate, other thing is to engage, and because engagement will lead to action. So I think these are different phases, and emotional gap, it's really something that we need to tackle, and in order to do that, we need to understand people's needs, people's idea, people's questions. Thank you.
You're right. We would need an afternoon.
I think I need a summary. If you can paraphrase one of these questions, and then I'm going to start to answer it. Do you remember any of the questions? Sorry.
I wrote them down.
Okay. Cool. Go ahead.
So there was a question about misinformation and climate change.
Sorry.
No, because I'm talking to you.
Sorry? Oh, yeah.
Misinformation and climate change, and science communication in education, the dangers of only communicating what people want to hear, and the issue of who's funding research.
Oh, interesting. Okay. What should I talk about? What do you want to talk about?
You choose if you have something to say. Otherwise, I can go on. You think. I'd like
Yeah, sure.
to just make a point about your beautiful question about the danger of having people hear what they, telling people what the public wants to hear, which will be a means to reinforce the bubbles. And you clearly point out something which is absolutely true. We tend to listen to the things that goes in the same direction as our beliefs, and listening to other things is much harder. And that's, I think, we talked about a lot. I mean, scientists have a hard time accepting the fact that they are not seen as evil people from the public. Why? Because they like to be convinced of that, and so they have a hard time changing. So, but this is a parenthesis. The point is, not to be misunderstood, and I think Anna agrees, we don't talk about telling the people what they want to hear, but telling people things that are relevant to them. And I think that the key word for science communication, on my view, is relevance. So before engaging in science communication, and maybe this is also an answer to policy, is try to analyze, understand, reflect, maybe even meditate about the relevance of what we do for people that are different from us. Because we tend to measure relevance always. A researcher, Emily Dawson, speaks about the ideal visitors when she speaks about the Science Museum. So we frame everything in terms of what looks like us, that we consider sort of our ideal public, ideal visitors, and all the others are people to be corrected in order to become as close as possible to the ideal visitors. No, the real work is trying to grasp what is the relevance of what we do, not for us, not from the people that are in this room, which are obviously kind of agreeing because if we spend 3 days here is because either we're paid for or we believe in what we do, and in both cases we will go on. And, but because we try to understand the relevance for people that have a different perspective, a different reading, a different time investment, and a different set of values from the one we have. Is it relevant? This, is, I think, is more proper than saying we tell them what they want to hear. No. This, if you are a commercial entrepreneur, you produce what people want to buy. We are not commercial, but we want to produce things that are relevant for the persons that we address. I don't know if this clarifies.
I can reflect on this actually. So my work, as I mentioned, is with the underserved communities, and that was a big question. Like, because I'm working on a project that we go with a science bus with all the equipment that is related to a plasma ball, we get like a bit of nails, and we're trying to explain simple physics to underserved communities, people who struggle having food and clothes on and stuff like that. They have more concerns other than talking about black holes or plasma ball and stuff like that. So I have defined this kind of problem actually working with underserved communities, because like you need to make the science that you give to them relevant. So I totally agree with you. So I went back to them again, and we're trying to do things that related to maybe issues that is like the lack of energy sources, for instance. Teach them how to make like a solar cell panel and stuff like that. Maybe tackling issues like water shortage in these areas. So talking about science that is about topics that is related to the situation of these socio-economic class of our society is really good. So I think relevance is really important in terms of like my experience in practicing science communication as well. So I totally agree with you. Yep, I think it's a good point.
I suggest a book by a woman called Nina Simon. Is easy to remember because it's like the singer, but she's not. Who's called The Art of Relevance, and I think is very relevant for us in this case, from Nina Simon.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer to Danielle, and he's going to be very happy with my response. Because when we did the consultation with citizens about science communication, it came up in the discussions that people are really keen to know who funds the science. Because, as it was said here already, when it's private funding, it raises suspicions. When it is public funded, it raises trust, because the government, the state, is seen as a disinterested actor that funds good science, and so it's trustworthy science. So you can take that to your bosses, that it's really important, and it's something that science communicators should pay attention to. Who funds the science? And it's something that I struggle with journalists, because when they put out the news, they often want to talk about what is the big discovery, how is this going to change people's lives, and sometimes forget or misspell the name of the institution that did the research and the institution that funded the research. So this is an important aspect. Science education, I think she has already left, so I'm going to jump that question. Climate change, quite a pointy issue. Again, we are not the United States. We have an unusually small percentage of the population that buys into misinformation about climate change and denies climate change or the human origin of climate change. So this is not an issue. The problem with climate change is government inaction. People are aware of the problem. They are aware of how catastrophic even it can be. They are really concerned. So again, it's not an issue of education or even communication, it's an issue of action. And that is what we have to solve. Not doing more lectures about climate change, more videos, more. Everyone is already convinced. It's the governments that have to change their attitudes. And so, again, in Portugal, not an issue.
Thank you very much. I think it's 3:30. That's exactly the time where we are supposed to stop. I thank you very much to our speakers. I don't know how to thank myself in this case.
We can thank you.
Thank you very much
Matteo.
for the organizers for having putting up a session about science communication within this beautiful conference. And thank you for your comments and questions, which were really helpful to elaborate even more on the topic that we suggested. And have a nice rest of the conference.
Thank you.